Sri Lanka. Well, it's been a horror story, especially towards the end, and it illustrates a number of things. For example, it illustrates just what is meant by responsibility to protect. A lot of noble rhetoric about responsibility to protect, but there was no particular Western advantage in protecting people who are being slaughtered and driven into concentration camps, so somehow that didn't make it in the noble rhetoric.
And that genocide has been allowed to happen by the world, while, as we know, there are, the West finds moral reasons to attack other countries which it needs to attack for strategic reasons. And so why are some war crimes acceptable and why are others not?
Going back to 1948, that you've had just a series of bad faith, so-called constitutional reforms by the Sinhala that were never carried out in good faith and ultimately repudiated, and another round of genocide inflicted on the Tamils. Let's take the ceasefire agreement and negotiations that when Rajapaksa won the elections, he repudiated the whole thing, lined up his international support, and proceeded to destroy the de facto state and the de facto government that the LTTE had set up in the north and the east of Sri Lanka, and exterminated about 146,000 Tamils in the process. So I think history shows that the Sinhala have never dealt with the Tamils in good faith, going all the way back to the beginning. Sure. Well, you have 146,000 Tamils exterminated there in Vani within just a few weeks. So I think it speaks for itself. My advice in the paper I wrote is that if we were going to the World Court to argue the Tamil issue as genocide, we had to start with 1948 and work our way up. You just cannot isolate out one particular massacre like Vani. It happened within a context, although clearly if you were just to take Vani itself, that would certainly be genocide there. But my advice, which I wrote for arguing this case in the International Court of Justice, would be to go back to 1948 and to establish this pattern and practice of intent to destroy in whole or in part the Tamils, the Elam Tamils, sure, by the Sinhala government. That would be my advice. But if people did not want to go back all the way back to 1948, well, fine. They could just take the Vani massacre, and we could certainly do it there.
Hundreds of thousands of civilians trapped on a slither of land, held hostage by one side, shelled indiscriminately by the other. The situation was desperate. There was nowhere to go.
If you understand the kinds of weapons being used, the way the battle lines were configured, eyewitness reports from a whole host of people, it's clear there was just massive artillery shelling, aerial bombardment. Every weapon in the book was being used.
Well, first, I think the Catholic bishop there in Jaffna on the scene estimated it was about 146,000 dead. So I think that's where we have to start. I think the 3 UN reports we have significantly undercount, but we don't know exactly for sure. Of course, it would help if there were to be some type of outside independent investigation to actually get the names of those who were killed, yes. They all had an obligation under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention to prevent and stop the ongoing genocide that was being perpetrated by the Rajapaksas, and they failed and refused to do so. Indeed, several governments provided help. The U.S. provided intelligence, India provided intelligence, and others.
Political parties here in Tamil Nadu accuse us. They claim that we have done nothing for the Tamil people, for our brothers, Tamil brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka. And I want to ask them, is there any party which has done more than the Congress party for the Sri Lankan Tamils? Rajiv Gandhi sacrificed his life while fighting for our brothers and sisters.
Mrs. Gandhi basically inflicted revenge, personal revenge, on 146,000 completely innocent Tamils in Sri Lanka because of this vendetta, this family vendetta she had against the LTTE, and there's no excuse for that under international law, none. Well, sure. In my book, I document numerous instances where basically UN officials went along with the Sinhala government. I mean, even the Petrie report, the internal UN report, pretty much admits that. So I stand by my conclusions. I don't think the current Zaid report does that. He made a pretty hard-hitting report, but he refused to use the word genocide deliberately on purpose.
War crimes and crimes against humanity, violations that are among the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole, have apparently been committed by state actors, and not just state actors, but by the LTTE and other paramilitary groups as well. It is our earnest belief and hope this report will lead to efforts to end impunity for such crimes. It is, I believe, an inescapable reality that Sri Lanka's criminal justice system is not yet ready to handle these types of crimes. First and foremost, there is the absence of any reliable system for victim and witness protection. Second is the inadequacy of Sri Lanka's domestic legal framework to deal with international crimes of this gravity and scale. The third challenge is the degree to which Sri Lanka's security sector and justice system have been distorted and corrupted by decades of emergency, conflict, and impunity. It is for these reasons the establishment of a hybrid special court integrating international judges, prosecutors, lawyers, and investigators becomes so necessary. A purely domestic court procedure will simply not succeed in overcoming the widespread and justifiable suspicions fueled by decades of violations, malpractice, and broken promises.
If you look at my recent comment on that on TamilNet, I have 2 comments there that I made. It simply bears out that the United Nations officials are complicit. They are accessories after the fact now to the Sinhala genocide against the Tamils. And by the way, if you read Zeed's report, he too goes all the way back to 1983, at least, the sentiments against the Tamils starting there. But that latest resolution just adopted last week proves the point that the UN is complicit in all this. They even commended the Sinhala military for what a great job they did exterminating 146,000 Tamils, and are now going along with a cover-up of the whole thing by setting up a so-called domestic mechanism allowing the Sinhala to investigate and prosecute themselves. This would sort of be like after World War II, allowing the Nazis to investigate and prosecute themselves for what they did to the Jews. And of course, that's not what happened. There was an international criminal tribunal at Nuremberg. Likewise, in the case of the Bosnians, and I was Bosnia's lawyer during the war, and argued their case for genocide to the World Court, and won 2 World Court orders for them, for Yugoslavia to cease and desist from committing genocide. The world set up an international criminal tribunal for the former Yugoslavia to investigate and prosecute war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. This is not being done for the Tamils on Sri Lanka. And then third, Rwanda. Outright genocide there by the Hutus against the Tutsis. Maybe 800,000 killed. We don't have an exact number. But again, the world set up the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda to prosecute for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. So let's take the case of Bosnia. During the war, the estimate was maybe 200,000 were exterminated by Yugoslavia. When the war was over and the UN had a chance to go in there and start counting people, they figured maybe 100,000 had been exterminated. Well, fine, that's roughly equivalent to the Vani massacre. If it was good enough for Bosnia, why not for the Elam Tamils? There's no excuse for this at all, none. It's simply a case of hypocrisy and double standards by the international community. Indeed, last week, the State Department took credit for this abhorrent resolution at the UN Human Rights Council, that it was Secretary of State Kerry's, and he pushed it through, and they took credit for it. So it's pretty appalling. But, that goes back to when Kerry was chair of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee and put out this reprehensible report saying that despite whatever atrocities the government of Sri Lanka had submitted against the Elam Tamils, nevertheless, for strategic interests, we had to get into cahoots with them. And that's exactly what we've done here in the United States. And the United States government then ran interference and did damage control and damage limitation for them at the UN Human Rights Council and also throughout the UN itself. And the UN goes along with this, despite the fact the highest level officials go along with it, despite the fact that under the terms of the United Nations Charter, Ban Ki-moon and all these other UN officials have an obligation to remain independent of any member state and to discharge their duties independently. But if you look at the history of the development of the massacre in Vani, which I document in my book, you'll see that the UN officials just went along with it, downplayed it, said very little about it, certainly never used the word genocide, and effectively were complicit in it. And even the Petrie report apologizes for what they did. Well, that's just crocodile tears. It doesn't help the Elam Tamils today. and the UN is still going along with it. So that gets to my second proposal. There's world court litigation that we have to look into. Now that there is a new government in India under Prime Minister Modi, replacing the Gandhi regime that was complicit and aided and abetted the genocide against the Elam Tamils. Mr. Modi says he's a devout Hindu. Well, as you know, large numbers of the Elam Tamils are Hindus, and the Hindus were attacked for being Hindus. Their shrines were destroyed and uprooted, and he's now bringing in Buddhist settlers to take their place. So it does seem to me that an effort has to be made in India, especially in Tamil Nadu now, with the Chief Minister Jayalalitha back in power, to get them to bring pressure to bear on New Delhi and Mr. Modi to file this genocide lawsuit at the World Court against Sri Lanka. The second point, now that it's clear as of last week that the United Nations is not going to do anything to bring the Sinhala genocidaires to justice, we're simply going to have to do it ourselves. We will have to get organized and a comprehensive legal campaign to track Rajapaksa and his genocidaires down anywhere they travel in the world and sue them, either criminally or civilly or both, depending on the domestic legal orders involved. This is exactly what the Jews did against the Nazis. And they still track down these Nazis today, 70 years after the end of World War II. There is no statute of limitations for these international crimes by Rajapaksa, Fonseca, and the rest of these people. And by the way, they are all conveniently mentioned by name in Zeid's report, which is very helpful. They're all there. So they can all be tracked down for the rest of their lives and prosecuted and sued. And in any state of the world, there is also universal jurisdiction for these crimes, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, that opens them up to prosecution in any state of the world. So we're just going to have to get this organized, like the Jewish people have done, and go after them, because the UN is not going to do it. That's very clear.
So,
UN should be doing it, and they aren't. So that means we have to do it, and we're going to have to put together lawyers and investigators and whatever to work on this. It'll be a big project, but eventually, I think justice can be brought against these people. It might take 20, 30 years. I went after Milosevic himself, the president of Yugoslavia, in the World Court for the Bosnians in 1993, and then got the ICTY prosecutor Carlo Del Ponte to indict him in 2000 for every crime in the ICTY statute, including 2 counts of genocide, one for genocide in Bosnia in general, and the second count for genocide at Srebrenica. And eventually, Milosevic was turned over to the ICTY and was being prosecuted for all these crimes. But it took almost a decade to get that done. Well, at the end of the day, it might be possible for there to be a confederal state on the island of Sri Lanka, where the Sinhala get their state and the Tamils get their state, and then both sides come together as equals not the conqueror and the victim, to negotiate terms of their arrangement. Obviously, the island Ceylon is a small island, and some type of confederal state might make sense, but that would have to be negotiated on both sides. Well, I've already called for a divestment, disinvestment campaign against Sri Lanka. Yes, I gave a speech to that effect at the FETNA convention a few years ago. I'm the one who launched the divestment, disinvestment campaign against Israel, which is now known as the BDS campaign, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. And as you know, that's been very effective, and it's taken off worldwide. And if you hit YouTube, you'll see the lecture I gave at the FETNA convention saying that we should also launch a BDS campaign against Sri Lanka. Yes. But again, it's really for the Tamils to decide, especially the diaspora Tamils, if that's the best way to go. I'm here just dealing with matters that have been done in the past and making suggestions based on sound legal arguments. But I'm not a Tamil. I'm Irish American. I'm here to, I'm a lawyer.
Sri Lanka is a party to the Convention Against Apartheid. So I am only holding them here to their own convention. And I note that there are 7 states parties to the Apartheid Convention, including India. So this is binding law on both Sri Lanka and India and 107 other states. Why is this important? Because, as Ellen pointed out earlier today in our US TPAC lectures, you have to establish a divestment, disinvestment campaign internationally, worldwide, against the government of Sri Lanka along the same lines and for the same reasons that the world did against the criminal apartheid regime in South Africa by the whites against the blacks. The legal principles are identical. The convention is identical. If it worked once, it will work again. But it is up to you to carry this out. Now, if you have a look at Article 1 of the Apartheid Convention, it defines apartheid as a crime against humanity. What is a crime against humanity? That goes back to the Nuremberg Charter for the prosecution of the Nazi criminals by the United States government and the other victorious powers in World War II. And the concept of crime against humanity was put in there specifically to deal with the Nazi persecution and extermination of the Jews. That is a paradigmatic example, though not limited to, a crime against humanity. And this convention, to which Sri Lanka is a party, and it has already agreed then that apartheid is a crime against humanity, legally analogous to what Hitler and the Nazis did to the Jews. I'm not saying the same numbers, of course, but legally analogous legally the same phenomenon.
Well, there's always going to be harm. I mean, that's what can I say? But unlike Israel, that has very powerful supporters around the world, including here in the United States, Sri Lanka doesn't have too many. And they do have a very vulnerable economy, you know, tea and clothes and textiles and tourism. So I think it'd be a much easier job here to do a BDS campaign on Sri Lanka than we have done on Israel. But again, you'd have to go back and look at my speech, and Tamils will have to decide that for themselves. I called for the BDS, the divestment, disinvestment campaign against Israel, and then I worked with Palestinians. This was November 2000, and I worked with some Palestinians to get it launched. And then finally in 2005, the Palestinian Civil Society contacted me and said, you know, we really want to expand it beyond divestment, disinvestment to boycott and sanctions. Will you go in with us? I said, sure. So then they took it over from there. You know, we do have that one precedent, but again, the Tamils will have to decide this for themselves, not me.
When the Sri Lankan army defeated the LTTE, otherwise known as the Tamil Tigers, in 2009, it ended a bitter civil war that had lasted more than 25 years. Ever since, there have been accusations from human rights groups that war crimes were committed by both sides.
War crimes and crimes against humanity, violations that are among the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole, have apparently been committed by state actors, and not just state actors, but by the LTTE and other paramilitary groups as well.
As I said, I'm focusing my efforts forward, not backward. And as Zeed correctly pointed out in his report, whatever violations the LTTE might have committed provides no justification or excuse for the Sinhala violations.